Now, throughout time, immemorial storytelling has been a way to preserve culture and heritage. It has had a power to preserve legacy and provide context for the story of a people. South Africa has a rich and diverse history, and on this Heritage Day, I am joined by Morakabe, Raks, Seakhoa, who is the founder and executive director of the South African Literary Awards, who is joining us to look at how we can preserve our culture and heritage through literature. Ndate Seakhoa, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and happy Heritage Day to you.
Thank you, Osmasa, and happy Heritage Day to you too, and to the listeners and viewers.
Absolutely.
Yes,
it's such an important conversation to have about preserving heritage, and not just today as well, but particularly also through literature. Tell us why and the significance of preserving our culture and history using literature.
It's very important to understand that literature is at the root of all art, of all culture. If you come to think of music itself, it starts by writing. Even painting, even design are all rooted in writing. There's a word called photography.
Yeah.
That is the art of writing with light. Photo, meaning light, and graph or graphy meaning writing. So you can see that the art of literature has always been there. We are quite happy to be celebrating today being the Heritage Day through literature, ourselves as the Right Associates, and also the South African Literary Awards. We've been at this for quite a while now. Next year we'll be celebrating 20 years of the South African Literary Awards. As you know, SALA, short for South African Literary Awards, when we started it in 2005, we started it with establishing the first National Poet Laureate Prize in South Africa ever. And that was given to Professor Mazisi Kunene, with celebrating him as a writer of note, besides being a political activist who started the anti-apartheid movement in London and Europe, but for his writing in isiZulu throughout his life. As we're talking now, he has left about 10,000 manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts of poetry and other stuff, which led to the establishment of the Mazisi Kunene Literary Museum and Foundation, of which I'm very proud to be part. So it's very important that we look at the literature as the source of our heritage.
And as Africans, it just seems, innately Africans are renowned for storytelling as well, and then also to capture that in written form too. We've got legendary writers as well, as you mentioning too. As we fast track to 2024, are you finding that there is enough literature that is written in African languages?
Yes, there is enough, but not enough.
Yeah.
If there's
even such a word as enough when it comes to this,
Yeah, but also if you look back, Osmasa, to our literature in African languages, really across the languages, we've got icons. My first full-length novel to read was by Thomas Mufulo on Shaka. But you find Obomunya Isa in Setswana, Mazisi Kunene, Bodlomo, in other languages. With the South African Literary Awards, we've got a category that deals with a translation from one African language to the other, or to other languages that are not necessarily African. But there is a bit of a dearth there compared to where we come from in terms of African languages. But the South African Literary Awards, and of course supported by the Department of Arts and Culture, recognized work in all our African languages, or rather South African official languages.
With a bit of the death in that kind of literature as well, writing in African languages in particular, is there a way that, you know, organizations like yourself, the Literary Awards, and like you're saying as well with government departments, where we can incentivize writers of African languages, but also is there a demand? Are people reading literature that is written in African languages?
It's a very powerful question, Osi. Incentivizing, and also is there
a demand?
A demand. Very important points. I think that's something that we all have to work very hard for. As we know already, the South African government set up a PENSAP, Pan South Africa Language Board. We've got the National Heritage Council. All of these, together with the organizations on the ground, like the Writers Associates and the South African Literary Awards, the International African Writers Conference that we also organize every year in November. I think it's about time that we really step up and connect even deeper to take forward our languages, because other languages, for instance, English and Afrikaans, and in other countries that had been colonized by, you know, the Spaniards or the Portuguese, the languages of those countries, the indigenous languages, suffered because they were suppressed in favor of the colonial language. So Afrikaans and English, for instance, in our country, lots of resources have been poured into that. And I think it's about time that our government and other structures not only talk about the preservation of these languages, but work on incentivizing the speakers and the professionals around that to make sure that they become the languages also of choice and of pride. Our kids today prefer other languages other than their own, which is a great pity.
Yeah.
We need to turn the wheel around.
Speaking also about just African themed books written in English as well, because there's clearly also a demand. Those books they get exported to other countries as well. The themes, are you finding that they're shifting? Are we telling more of our history stories? Are we moving more into a fictional space? Are we getting more creative with the kinds of literature that we're writing and reading?
That's a very telling question that you talk about, Osmasa. I'm reminded of one young, I don't think you'd like it anymore to be called young, writer, Mhlongo Nick.
Yes,
Mhlongo,
exceptional writer. Yeah.
You know, today South Africa is receiving the remains of our heroes and heroines. And Nick wrote a powerful book that captures that theme so strongly way back home. I recommend that book to everyone.
I thoroughly enjoyed the book too. Yes, I did. I love Nick Mhlongo's work.
Yeah, so other than that, the themes that we find, for instance, the books we've been receiving and getting educated by about 35 judges across languages in South Africa through the South African Literary Awards. We find a lot of very interesting themes, not because the book is written in an African language, then it will all be about the rural life, about tradition, but you find that even in our languages, situations or themes like gender parity, like climate change, are being covered there, which is quite an interesting development. Because before, when you talked about our languages, people expected, just about village life. And, yeah.
I mean, when I think about, for instance, Zima, Black Diamond, Zima has a variety of work where he does talk about history, politics, but then also he's got books about, society and what it looks like today, and also not reflecting on the past. and like for instance that book, Black Diamond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Zix is a very exceptional writer. You know, he's not only a writer, he's also, you know, a painter, a beekeeper.
A true creative.
And of course, a very acclaimed, highly acclaimed academic. He stretches across all genres, all subjects, history, you know, modernity, royalty. Man, you read that guy, you know, you find that you've, you know, covered quite a big canvas. I mean, he's written a book on Mapungubwe, you know. He puts you there, like, when it was still a very rich, undisturbed civilization of our people, where things like diamond and gold were already mined quite successfully long before white people came into the country.
It's been a fascinating talk, and I think there's different ways of, you know, preserving our cultures and heritage through literature, as we have discussed this morning as well. Thank you so much for coming into studio and having this conversation with us.
No, we thank you very much, Masa. But just to steal this moment, that as a South African Literary Awards, we are planning now to get into the final adjudication of about 300 books this weekend, you know, with about 40 or so judges. That's going to culminate in the handover ceremony on the 7th of November at the National Museum of Cultural History in Pretoria. So you're most welcome there. And people can check us out on sala.org.za.
And I would urge them to do that. Thank you so much for your time.